world never expected a small, landlocked nation like Burkina Faso to shake the very foundations of global geopolitics. But when whispers emerged that China was equipping Ibrahim Traoré with next-generation weapons, everything changed. For decades, France had dominated West Africa, politically, economically, and militarily. Yet today, that dominance is slipping through their fingers, from Chinese drones and advanced air defense systems to intelligence-sharing alliances across the Sahel. Burkina Faso is no longer the vulnerable state Paris once controlled. Instead, it has become the epicenter of African resistance. So, is this truly game over for France in Africa, or just the beginning of an even greater power struggle? To understand the gravity of this moment, we must first step back into history. For over a century, France exploited Burkina Faso and much of West Africa through the colonial system. Even after independence, the grip never loosened. French corporations extracted gold, uranium, and cotton. French troops occupied bases across the Sahel under the pretext of security. And the infamous CFA franc currency tied African economies to Paris. But everything began to shift when Ibrahim Traoré, a young captain barely in his mid-30s, rose to power in 2022. Unlike his predecessors, Traoré wasn't willing to compromise Burkina Faso's sovereignty. He denounced French interference, expelled foreign troops, and aligned with the newly formed Alliance of Sahel States, AES, alongside Mali and Niger. France, humiliated, began losing ground. By 2023, French troops had been expelled from most of the Sahel. But that left one critical question. Without France's military umbrella, how would these nations defend themselves against terrorist insurgencies and foreign pressure? That's where China entered the picture. For years, Beijing had been expanding its influence in Africa through trade, infrastructure, and diplomacy. But now, something different was happening. China was no longer just building railways or hospitals. It was stepping directly into the security vacuum left by France, and Burkina Faso was about to become the first testing ground. Reports began surfacing in late 2024 of unmarked cargo planes landing in Ouagadougou under heavy security. Local sources whispered of Chinese advisors meeting behind closed doors with Burkinabe military officials. Soon after, leaked documents hinted that China had provided advanced drones, anti-aircraft systems, and encrypted communications technology to the Traoré government. For France, this was nothing short of a nightmare. For decades, Paris relied on its ability to militarily outmatch African nations, ensuring dependency. But if Burkina Faso suddenly had cutting-edge weapons rivaling NATO technology, that balance of power would collapse overnight. Meanwhile, the people of Burkina Faso, long weary of France's exploitation, rallied behind Traoré. Nationalist pride surged as videos of Burkinabe soldiers testing Chinese drones began circulating online. State media portrayed Traoré as the defender of African sovereignty, standing tall against foreign domination. International analysts quickly took notice. According to the South China Morning Post, Beijing's defense exports to Africa had grown by 35% over the past decade, with drones being the centerpiece of its military partnerships. Burkina Faso's deal, though not officially confirmed, appeared to be the first large-scale military partnership in the Sahel between China and an African state. And then came the AES factor. Together, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso pledged to defend one another. With Chinese technology bolstering their capabilities, the alliance began to look less like a symbolic union and more like a genuine military bloc, one capable of defying France, the European Union, and even NATO. But the story doesn't end there. Russia, already active in Mali through the Wagner Group, quietly welcomed China's involvement. For Moscow, it meant Paris and Washington were losing yet another front. For Beijing, it meant expanding its influence in Africa's most resource-rich region. And for Traoré? It meant his tiny nation had suddenly become the front line of a global power shift. The tipping point came when France openly accused China of destabilizing Africa. French officials warned that foreign powers were exploiting instability in the Sahel for their own gain. But these words rang hollow. After all, who had destabilized Africa for over a century if not France itself? In early 2025, intelligence leaks confirmed what many had suspected. Burkina Faso had successfully tested Chinese-made stealth drones capable of long-range surveillance and precision strikes. This wasn't just symbolic. It meant the AES could now monitor vast stretches of desert, track insurgent movements, and defend its borders without relying on French or American assistance. The global media erupted. CNN framed it as China's creeping militarization of Africa. Le Monde in Paris called it a direct threat to French interests. Meanwhile, African outlets like Jeune Afrique hailed it as a historic moment of independence. And in the middle of it all, Ibrahim Traoré stood defiant. In a fiery address broadcast to millions, he declared, "Burkina Faso will never again be a colony. Our resources, our land, and our people belong only to us. Those who seek to dominate us will find that Africa has risen." For France, it was a humiliating defeat. For China, a strategic triumph. And for Africa, perhaps the first glimpse of a new era. As the dust settled, the implications became clear. France's century-long grip on Africa had been broken, not just militarily, but psychologically. Burkina Faso's partnership with China sent a powerful message. Africa was no longer willing to be dictated to by its former colonizers, but the bigger question now is what comes next. Will China's support truly empower African sovereignty? Or will it simply replace one form of foreign dependence with another? Critics warn that China's military aid, while helpful in the short term, could entangle Burkina Faso in Beijing's long-term geopolitical strategy. Already, China controls significant portions of Africa's mineral exports. Could advanced weapons become another tool of influence? Yet supporters argue this is precisely what Africa needs, a balance of power. For too long, France and the Yaba West monopolized Africa's destiny. By diversifying partnerships, nations like Burkina Faso finally gain leverage. For the Burkinabe people, the shift is already tangible. Schools and universities now speak of national pride instead of dependency. Young soldiers see themselves not as pawns of Paris, but as defenders of an independent Africa. And across the continent, leaders from Guinea to the Democratic Republic of Congo are watching closely. Because if Burkina Faso succeeds, it won't just be Traoré's victory, it will be a continental awakening. As one African commentator put it, France has lost Africa, and Africa has found itself. So we return to the question, is this truly game over for France? Or merely the first round of a much larger battle between old colonial powers and new global challengers? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain, Ibrahim Traoré has already changed the rules of the game forever. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.